Welcome to the selfgrowth.com show. My name is David Riklan, and I'm the founder of selfgrowth.com. Today, we'll be discussing how to bring more peace and joy into your life. To help us understand this topic, I'm excited to interview Becky Hayes. Make sure to listen closely. We're going to be sharing a lot of information today. Before we get started, I want to take a couple of minutes and share some information about Becky. Becky Hayes is an NLP life coach and hypnotherapist who inspires transformation in her clients to step into their authentic power. Becky's experienced transformation in her own life as a performing musician, the corporate administrator of a startup company which successfully sold, the producer and co-founder of a video production company which sold to a PR firm, and co-producer of an amazing documentary, Beyond Belief, a film about the power of the subconscious mind and how limiting beliefs can block you. For over 12 years in her private practice, Becky's held sessions to help clients transform their lives and really step into this authentic power. Becky's a member of the National Guild of Hypnotists and the National Society of NLP and holds a degree in psychology with honors. She's also a Reiki master and a certified spiritual counselor. And I just want you to jot down her main website. It's Becky, B-C-K-Y, Hayes, Hays.com. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. That's her primary website to get in touch with her. Becky, welcome to our show.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to jump right in over here. So many people today are striving to find more peace and joy in their life, especially during times there's a lot of stress, there's struggle and conflict. There's a lot of things going on for people today. When you work with clients, what are some of the main issues that pull people away from kind of being at peace?
Well, you're right about that. I would say of all the reasons people come to see me, that's really probably the number one main reason, even if they don't realize it, that people are being pulled away from their peace, their joy, their happiness. And when they start to look at what makes that happen, what pulls them away from it, it's often not what they believe. They often believe it's something outside of them, something out there is making this happen.
Sure.
But where they have all the control and they start to realize is sometimes it's what's going on inside. It can be their thoughts, what they're thinking about, their beliefs, what they believe about what's happening. Unfortunately, that's where they have the control.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, we get caught up in the external. And I know a lot of people tend to kind of blame the external for all their internal issues. And I know that happens a lot to people. And as you mentioned, the thoughts, beliefs, they're worried about their choices and things like that. So if people are stuck in this rut of kind of this concern about what's going on outside and the impact and having that impact them, how do people go about changing that?
Good question. And that's what we address in the sessions. And I'd like to give people a couple of simple ways they can do that here today. And one of the ways that they can begin to change that is something that I call the 80-20 rule. You might be familiar with that. A lot of people in business know about the 80-20 rule. But I turned it around slightly to use in a different way that helps people get back to their peace. And especially today, as you know, is a good time. Many people are looking, how do I just get to that place of peace and joy? So if you're familiar with the original 80-20 rule, that was basically about the idea that 20% of what you do produces the greatest result.
Right.
20% of the work you do produces most of the productivity. But that shows up across the board. You can look at planting seeds, and 20% of the seeds will usually produce 80% of the yield. So that idea is focus in on that 20% that's effective and you'll have the best result. But I've kind of turned that around slightly so that I recommend to my clients, change your life around, rearrange your life so that 80% of what you do is bringing you joy, happiness, fulfillment. 80% of your life is what lifts you up and makes you feel good. The part that brings you down, the negative part, the constrictive part, limit that to 20%. And as you start to shift your life around, and you can limit 20% of your life to contain what brings you down and let the rest expand. That's my new 80-20 rule. It's almost backwards of the other way around.
I got that. That's interesting. Can you give an example? So I get the concept. So that makes a lot of sense. You want to focus on the majority of your life being this positive. That's going to help you bring inner peace. So can you give an example of how this could apply? How you'd apply it in your life?
So an example of that, because when I explain this to people, they like you, they're great idea, but how do you do that?
Right,
I
right.
have all these negative things and I can't change that. So they will begin to focus on the negative because that's already what's consuming their life. And it starts to seem impossible to change. Well, what is the negative about? What brings you down? It can be situations, environments, other people. It might be your boss, your coworkers, your family. That's what people are blaming on the external.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, I can't get rid of my family. I have to work for my boss. So they're finding limitations on how to reduce that negativity. But the way you can reduce it, and another way, is to go inside internally and look at your thoughts, look at your beliefs, what you're focusing on. So I've experienced this over and over and over again in my own life and how I've changed it, where changing what you focus on can immediately change how you feel. Changing your thoughts can change how you feel. So changing a habit, habits can either fit into that negative part that brings you down or the
Mm-hmm.
part that expands. And it can be a habit that's as simple as something you do every day without noticing. We were speaking earlier about people. Earlier today, I was talking to someone about how people blame and complain. Well, if you have a habit of listening to someone who likes to call you up because they know you will listen and they complain for an hour or two or
Right.
three, and then you hang up and you're exhausted and your energy's drained and that's brought you down. That's robbed you of your peace. That's robbed you of your
Mm-hmm.
joy. And that can become a habit that you automatically pick up the phone and let them go on for three
Right.
hours. So that's one example of how you could change that habit even by limiting the time you're willing to spend listening.
Mm-hmm.
Some people feel obligated. They say, well, this is my family or my
Right.
friend. Of course I need to be there and listen. But you could limit the time. Some people may decide they're not taking those calls anymore. They're changing that habit. And so there are a lot of simple ways that don't take a lot of effort or energy that you can make the change and begin to reshape that. But one of the ways I really like is not only because some people have a belief, they really believe they can't change all the negative energy around them, the negative interactions. It's just they're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, well, then change your focus onto the 80% and expand it. Because if you change nothing at all about the parts of your life that bring you down, but you start to expand the parts that lift you up, if you start to fill that up and make it bigger and it becomes so large, it just overrides everything. What's already there and has been there won't bother you anymore. It seems to become smaller because everything else is becoming bigger. So it might be bringing in more positive people that lift you up.
Mm-hmm.
It might be doing more of the simple things in life that you love to do. But I ask people to look at the overall picture of your life, how much of it is spent in the constrictive, robbing you of peace, how much is spent in lifting you up, and adjust that.
So one of the things that, correct me if I'm wrong, so what I'm hearing in terms of this 80-20 rule, so I like the concept, is almost two things. One, initially you're looking at what in your life you're doing and where you're spending your time that's adding to you in a positive manner, that's detracting you in a negative manner. And then really focusing on two things, I guess, thinking more about the positive till your thoughts are 80% of that, and also spending more time on the things that are providing positive, with the goal being kind of this 80-20 balance, where 80% that either 80% of your time is focused on thoughts on positive things or actually doing positive things. Is that kind of the big strategy? Is that a way to explain
It
it?
is, and you're actually ahead of most people because some people are focusing on what they do and they say, I don't have time to do anymore to fill up this 80%. I'm already doing too much. That's part of the reason I'm stressed out and my happiness
Right.
has been taken away. And it's not that you even have to do anything because it's a lot of it can be internal in the space in your mind and what you're thinking about. But those simple habits, like I mentioned about listening to someone complain or making a new choice, we make thousands of choices a day, that you realize this is going to expand that 80%. And it is a constant balance. It's a lifelong goal to move towards. It's not that you're done and you're there. But as you look at ways you can do this, when you reach 80%, and it doesn't even really have to be 80, it could be 70-30,
Right.
but when you get to that point, 80% is a B. It's a passing grade.
Right.
It's above average. It's not
Sure.
even average. It's better than average. If
Sure.
you're above average, people would describe that as a happy life. They would
Sure.
describe that as, I have a peaceful, joyful life. I have a B life. It's above average. Then that other 20%, the part that you cannot eliminate completely, but will be so small, you won't even notice it. It won't bother you so much anymore. So
Okay.
that's one goal to strive towards, is that rearranging the balance.
I like that concept because I think a lot of people are having these negative thoughts and negative activities in their life. That's what they're focusing on. Whether it's work, they come home, they're going to work, they see the negativity there, they come home, they see the negativity there. But within all that, within work, even if a lot of it's negative, there's positive things to focus on. And the same thing with your personal life.
Exactly. And even if something negative comes up at work or in a relationship or wherever it is, and it happens for 5 minutes, then it's over.
Right. Okay.
Then people spend 3 hours still thinking about it. And that's the part that could fill up your 80%.
Sure. Oh, quickly.
So that's one simple way as a lifelong, like a lifestyle to strive for.
Mm-hmm. So you're really, it sounds from what you're saying, the kind of first step is to really identify kind of where you're spending your day, positive, negative. And then once you've figured that out, for example, you're talking about these phone calls that could be the hour negative phone calls, kind of flip it and really focus to building up the positive and reducing the negative.
And right. And many people have things they love to do, and they're simple, they're short, they don't take much effort or time, but they don't do them because they're focusing on all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Spending more time doing that. Do you love to go outside to go for a walk? Do you love to play a certain sport? Do you love to do yoga? What do you love to do that you've been depriving yourself that wouldn't take much effort? How can you fill up that 80%?
Okay.
That's
I like the concept. What's that?
So that's your homework for the day.
Okay.
Not
And
yours.
I like flipping the way you flip the 80-20. I've never heard that analogy before, but it makes total sense, and it's a good way to flip it. So I know you have some other tools and other things, a lot of other things. What's another tool that people can use kind of starting today to bring more peace into their life?
This is one you can use starting today. It's one of my favorite tools, which is the idea of non-attachment. And this often comes up, and it's interesting that people have a lot of ideas. What is non-attachment, and how do I practice non-attachment without giving up what I want? Because I really want this thing that I'm going for. So that's the paradox, is it's not about giving up something, but it's giving up your attachment to it. And non-attachment it's almost like an energy. You feel it, that you're really attached to having a certain outcome or having something going your way or controlling or making it work out a certain way. And you can feel the difference when you're attached or not. You could be doing the very same process, moving towards a goal, doing whatever you want to do with attachment or without. But the difference is in how it affects you and how you feel.
All right. So I've heard the concept of non-attachment, kind of a Buddhist concept that's been around for a long time. And I know it's not an easy concept for people, this non-attachment, because as you mentioned, for a lot of people, if you're attached to it, it's going to drive you more. So that's kind of an unconscious perception that the more attached you are to something, the more likely. And I think a lot of people think that if you're giving up this attachment, you're kind of giving up your want. So how do you go about practicing this non-attachment without giving up the strong desire?
And that was a great way to describe it, that you're right. A lot of people believe this isn't attachment. This is me being driven. This is me being determined. This is me being productive.
Sure.
And I've been that way when I had the video production company and we create different companies and organizations hired us. It was attachment driven, make this happen. And it was productive and things happened. But later on, when we made the movie Beyond Belief that I made with one of my colleagues from my NLP training, he was also a filmmaker. And we were studying these ideas and we were practicing these ideas, even as we were making the documentary. There was a huge difference because I believe the one tool we used more than anything else was non-attachment. So like any work that people do, any production, things go wrong. Things don't turn out the way you plan or that you hope or what you expect. But the practice of non-attachment made the whole process so much easier and smoother. I could feel the difference. It brought more joy and happiness and peace into my life. And the way we did that is you have your goal, you have every intention of reaching it, you're moving towards it all the way up until the moment it doesn't happen, all the way up until the moment you realize it's not going to happen. And that's the moment you get to choose to be attached or not. So I almost divide it into two parts because there's sort of this pre-attachment choice. I have this goal in the future, but I'm really attached. It really needs to happen. If anything even looks like it won't happen, I can feel it in my body and start to tense up. That would be a pre-attachment before the goal happens. This really has to happen this way. And I see this a lot with clients with relationships. It comes up a lot.
Sure.
Really have to have this guy or this person really needs to do this thing for me that I'm in relationship with, or he better text me in the next 10 minutes because I just sent a text to him if he doesn't. So there's an attachment to getting that text back. And that usually in the long run creates more problems and conflict than it does a close relationship. So before it happens, you can even release your attachment to it as you're moving towards it. But then there's after the fact, looking back when it's over, when you know for certain it's done, it's not going to happen, it's in the past. Then people still stay attached to that, looking back, and that causes more struggle and conflict and robs them of their peace. So it's letting go of what you know is already over. And an interesting way that can happen, that happened to me in an unusual way, is what I would call changing your identity or your self-image, which is a lot of what we do in session, because people, if they want to change something, we describe how, well, getting your self-image to fit this new you, which is basically the old you with maybe some updates or modifications, is a change. But some people are really attached to their identity or their self-image, which is completely made up anyway, and it's changing all the time, but we believe it's who we are. So every time I changed from playing music into letting that go and creating the video company, that was a change of identity, but that transition was, oh, I lost my identity that I was very attached to. And then let that go. And then changing from making videos into what I do now with my practice with hypnotherapy and LP was another identity change of like, I had this identity as a video producer that I was somewhat attached to, and then letting that go. But I feel the difference. I believe it's a lifelong practice. It's kind of like, you mentioned Buddhism or yoga or whatever your practice is. You don't just do it one day and you're done. It's a practice. It's a lifelong practice. So I still practice it all the time. I'm noticing a lot of times if you're feeling robbed of your peace, your joy or happiness, is a good time to just check in and ask, what am I attached to right now that's making me feel this way? And can I let that go and immediately feel better? So I've had lots of practice at non-attachment, and there's still more ahead to come.
That's interesting. So let me share a little bit where kind of this non-attachment has fit in for me, because I get this, and I think it's very important because attachment can get you obsessed in a negative way, especially when you still have that attachment after the hope is gone. It's not happening, you know, whatever it is. And I like this concept of this identity, where you're really looking at your identity, because you identify, you know, you identify yourself as someone who has to have something in particular, and then the realization comes you're not going to get it. Who are you? You know, so you're no longer that person who had to get whatever it is. Whether it's a new house, a new relationship, a new job. Once the realization sets in that you didn't get it, if you have this level of attachment, who are you? You're kind of floundering. But one of the things that I've seen this with myself is, in the past, I get very attached to how people should interact with me, or how people should respond to me. And you mentioned, you know, people who need to date a particular person, or they need to, and sometimes you need to marry. This is the person I need to be married to, or this is the only job I need to have, this job or no other job. So with me, it's relative to interactions with people. And I used to have this strong desire to kind of almost force a will on people, or try to force that you should be responding in this particular way. But you don't really have control. What I've realized, that I don't have control over how people are going to react to me. It's the one thing, yeah, you have control over how you're going to react, and you're going to engage, and how you're going to let things impact you, but you don't really have control over how other people. And I had to kind of develop this non-attachment to it, because in the past I'd like be very upset if someone didn't react in a particular way. You know, yeah, I had expectations, and by letting it go, or creating this non-attachment, it kind of releases you. It relaxes you. It releases you. You know, it's giving up. In a sense, it's giving up, but it's giving up on something that you really didn't have any control over to begin with.
That's right. That's a good way to put it.
It's giving up on something that, you know, that you couldn't possibly attain, because you can't control everybody in your life and what they think and say and do. So it's giving up on something that you should have given up on, because you don't
That's
have
right.
that power.
It's giving up on something you never had control over in the beginning. And
Exactly. So what other benefits can people expect from adding this kind of non-attachment into their lives, or doing this practice?
well, another, just relating to what you just mentioned, and another experience I had with the documentary, with expecting people to be a certain way or respond or act a certain way. We had several experiences where things didn't go the way we wanted or planned, and we had a choice to let it go immediately and move on, or be attached to it. But we were on one production where Tad and Adriana are in the documentary, but they were scheduled in a day in a city that we were flying to different cities, where we had several people scheduled with the film crew, and they had their slot put aside. And just before the interview, I get a call that they had a seminar the night before and they had food poisoning, and there was no way they could get on the plane.
Right.
And I was really attached somewhat to them being in the documentary, because they're very good at what they do. But I had a choice right then, with the whole crew and people there, and guests coming in very soon, about what to do. And I can remember the shift that was different than before, where I immediately hung the phone up and walked away, and within steps, that attachment was gone.
Right.
It was like moving into acceptance. Well, this isn't going to happen. And moving on and letting it go. And so the energy, the focus, everything comes in, it's so much better. But
Right.
what ended up happening, and I believe this happens all the time, when you let go of attachment, it opens up the space for something better to come in. Something unexpected shows up. So we had another guest that day, Marcy Shimoff, came in and said, my friend's here from out of town and just has to come and be in this documentary. And we were like, there would not have been room to fit, because it was such a tight schedule. But as it worked out, her friend was able to come and also participate. And then later, Tad and Adriana managed to come to another city, and they were still in the documentary. That couldn't have happened if we'd tried to control it all and had that attachment. But I find that often when you let go, something better comes in. And I've seen this in clients with jobs, you've mentioned career, where they wanted this particular job so bad, but they knew they had to be calm for the interview. But it's also about letting go of attachment. And I've seen this over and over and over, where they'll come back and say, I got the job, but it's really weird because I got to this place where I went to the interview where they were not attached. They were willing to go either way. It didn't matter anymore. And not that it doesn't matter, but they weren't attached.
Right.
And then it comes in. So that can show up in many different ways.
I like the concept. And I always think back, there's a saying, I don't know where it came from originally, but when one door closes, another door opens.
Exactly.
But in essence, you need to remove the attachment to that other door, and you need to let it close. You need to get the concept that it's going to close. So I know you work with a lot of people in terms of their issues they're facing. So we talked about a lot of issues, people's stress, what they're dealing with, whether personal life, business life, and you work with a lot of folks. And obviously you shared a couple of concepts today, and there's a lot of other ways that you work with people. If people are interested in working with you or getting more information, where can people learn more about what you do and kind of all the exciting work and the things that you're involved with?
Well, you mentioned earlier a website, beckyhayes.com, and that's a place where people can go and see some of the feedback from some of my clients about what they've experienced and fill out a form for a free phone consultation if they'd like to learn more about it. And then I have another website that has a lot more information, but that site has the main information about getting started if you'd like to learn more and get in touch with me.
All right, so first step, if you want to learn more about what Becky's doing, or if you want to work with you, it's just go to her website, BeckyHayes.com. It's BECKY, Hayes, HAYS.com. And if you go there, I think you mentioned you can set up a phone consultation. It's a free phone consultation. You'll find out what she does, if you're a good fit, and some of the other things that you're doing.
Exactly.
All right, we covered a lot of stuff today. Any final thoughts for people before we finish up?
I have one final thought and one more tip. And this is something we get into more in session, but when you're trying to practice both of those 80-20 rule, how do I rearrange my life when it seems impossible or non-attachment seems too hard to do because I'm really attached? This is a really good belief to have, to ask yourself, what if this is the best thing that ever happened? And especially when it seems like it's not. When it seems like in the moment it's the opposite.
Right.
Just by asking yourself that question begins to create a shift inside. And it often tends to be true. But since you can never prove if it's true, because you don't get to do both paths, you'll only do one, you might as well choose to believe it, because often it really is. And 5 years later, you see people looking back going, that was the best thing that ever, that didn't seem like it at the time. It seemed like the worst. It's the best thing that ever happened. So when you're trying to practice non-attachment and then it seems hard to do because you're really attached and it didn't turn out the way that you planned, remind yourself, what if this is the best thing that ever happened?
I like it. That's a good question to ask. All right. Sounds good. Well, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing this information today.
Thank you, David. And thank you for all the work that you do and you've been doing for so many years, helping so many people. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I want to thank everybody for listening today. Make sure to check out Becky's website. And I wish you all great success in all the areas of your life and inner peace. We'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.
Bye.